No, I talked about how, depending on who the writer is, it all depends on how they treat a character, what their agenda is for the character, or how they see a character should be. When I mentioned earlier today, um, when I talked about it isn't the main thing about you, Sia's Rainbow music video being leaked or debuting in China, and then of course about the head writer, about whoever the head writers were, the writers period, and how they look at a character and how they feel a character should be represented. One of the things I always brought up, one of the things I brought up and I've brought up before, is when Lauren Faust was in charge, or at least would oversee and give the final say, and if not write an episode herself, how things like Rarity and Spike's relationship would actually be focused on. And how even though it could be like someone like M.A. Larson who would write the episode, or Joanne Lewis, or Megan herself, or Jason Teresen would write the episode, they would always write it in a way that if they had to focus on Rarity and Spike and kind of hint a little bit at the relationship between the two, that they did it because of a few reasons. One major reason is, like a lot of fans, they probably found it cute and adorable that here you had a young dragon, baby dragon, kid dragon, adolescent dragon, maybe an adult dragon, just small in stature, basically small in size, having a crush and having strong, beyond friendship feelings for this beautiful, radiant pony called Rarity. I should also throw in the generous pony in Rarity. That even though, depending on who the writer is, she can sometimes portray the damsel in distress, the drama queen, sometimes she could, as she says in her part of the We're Not Flawless song, could be a little stuck up, a little bit more, try to be more highfalutin kind of deal. The reason sometimes they would go in that direction is because they would find it adorable, I should say, if not whimsical, cute, and if not a bit stuck in reality, to have someone like Spike fall for someone like her, but in return have someone like her that you wouldn't think would have anything to do with him actually return and recuperate or reciprocate and return those feelings in such manner. In season 2, in which Lauren Faust was still a strong part of the show and still had a strong say in how things went, I believe the M.A. Larson episode, Secret of My Success, they could have gone in any direction they wanted to. But they went in a direction that pretty much was like a love letter, as short and soon to the point as it was. It was kind of like a love letter to the supporters, to the fans that already started to get behind this pairing ever since season 1. And when you had that moment at the end of the episode where Spike is basically admitting his feelings to Rarity, and she quiets him with a hoof and acknowledging with tears in her eyes that she already knows and pretty much kind of feels the same way, one has to say was probably the best representation of this pairing that anybody has ever seen. But ever since then, we have seen hints here and there, nods, if not full on. What I'm saying is, we have seen hints, nods, if not full on. Here you go, folks. Here's something for you guys to enjoy. Episodes and moments between these two characters. Another good example that some may feel really strengthens this relationship, but some may say put Spike in the friend category, is inspiration manifestation. But I don't think it does. I mean, she says they're friends, which they are. And everybody knows that sometimes when you're still acknowledged as a friend, you're still going to be put in that friend zone perspective until the moment arrives to where whether or not you both accept the fact that there is something there, or you both realize, hey, we need to move on and try to find other opportunities in our life. There is nothing really indicating that he's indicating that pretty much shut the door on it, because it doesn't. Another example, as some people would put it, is a gauntlet for fire, or gauntlet of fire. Kichi, one of the prominent reviewers of the Brony Pegasus community, pointed out in her collab with another reviewer that Rarity, when they did the review of this episode, that Rarity did actually care for Spike, because apparently she was probably one of them that was on the fence about this. But to see the fact that Rarity, still dirty and all that from the cave, from the mine and all that she and Spike were in, still dirty and everything, willing to go out of her way and take Spike to Twilight to see what's going on, you know, some would say that's an indication that there is something there. Because as much as Rarity is portrayed in different perspectives, depending on the writers, for her to do that in the eyes of the fans, it shows that maybe there is something there. But we haven't seen what that could be yet. But here's what's crazy about this. Here's what's crazy about this. And if you hear anything, that's my washer in the background. Here's what's crazy about this. You have a bunch of fans out there that support this. It's kind of similar to Sonic and Sally of Sonic the Hedgehog fame. In Sonic the Hedgehog fame, comic book, Saturday morning cartoon, Saturday AM fame, whatever. Anytime people would do fan vids on them, anytime people would discuss them or talk about them, the amount of views they would get on the DeviantArt page, or the amount of views they would get on the YouTube page, would be unbelievable. Because what they would get is people either positively or negatively pointing out the reasons as to why that pairing works. Some would give negative reasons that some felt ridiculous, like, oh, Sonic the Hedgehog, Sally's a squirrel, Sonic should only be with Amy. And that would be basically game enthusiasts, hardcore Sonic gamers that feel that's the only way Sonic should go. Well, others would be like, well, if you look at Sally, she's the perfect balance, she's the perfect foil for him, because she can place him, put him in her place, call him out and stuff, and he could do the same thing to her. So when people discuss those two as an item, and heck, even do AMVs or fan vids on them, like I said, the amount of views people would get at the YouTube, Dailymotion, VidMe channels now would be unbelievable. The same with Spike and Rarity. You go on YouTube and you see the amount of PMVs, Pony Music Videos. That's PMV for short. That's you look at the amount of PMVs, which is short for Pony Music Videos. You take a look and you see the amount of Spike and Rarity PMVs, and how many views they get, or how many views someone would get on the Facebook page or the DeviantArt page announcing that announcing and linking people to said PMV. It would be surprising to see how much. And why? Because people enjoy seeing these two. Some kindle it, or some akin it or relate it to the classic underdog story. We've seen it many times before. Here's a beautiful, sultry, gorgeous girl that's one of the nicest girls that you know of, and that's even nice to you, and yet, despite your differences, despite how different you might be, or whatever makes you different, still likes to talk with you, still likes to hang out with you, but is unaware of how you truly feel. I think that's what attracts people to Spike and Rarity. A good example, if I was to look at it, is during Christmas time. During Christmas time, one of the more traditional animated specials that comes on CBS is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Now, the classic Rankin Bass special extends and expands on the classic Rudolph song. It gives origin to it, it gives depth to it, it gives an overall classic story to it. But another thing that it does, which a lot of people have really enjoyed, is it shows that no matter how different Rudolph is, just because of his red nose, there are going to be those that will accept him, if not find him attractive. In this case, you have the character of Khalees. Khalees actually likes Rudolph for who he is. She doesn't shun him because he has a red nose. She actually starts to develop feelings for him. She finds him attractive. Even when he's disguising his red nose originally, she still finds him cute. And even without it, she finds him even more handsome. Handsome because he's himself. And that's what she likes about him. Another good example when it comes to the Rudolph story is 1999. Good Times Entertainment, along with Tundra Animation, brought us Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the movie, a full-length animated film, direct-to-video, and I think before then, at times, in selected theaters. Now, this kind of expanded somewhat on what we had with the classic stop-motion special and added more depth to it, if you will, added new characters, definitely added new characters, as well as kind of continued that tradition of the classic underdog falling for the beautiful girl and vice versa. In this case, Rudolph's love interest, who accepted him for who he was named Zoe. But what's different between the 1999 version and the original 1960s version is Rudolph never had to cover up his nose. Instead, Zoe accepted him for who he was. They even had a freaking song dedicated to this moment, to them finally realizing how they feel about each other after they're grown up. Basically, the friendship expanded to the point that they grew up with each other, and now that friendship has become something more. We also see that Zoe, for majority of her fawnhood and into her adulthood, or her doehood into her fawnhood, or whatever you want to, however you interpret a growth of a female deer from young to old, or young to, from child to adult. Basically, for most of that time, she was with another reindeer. And this reindeer was basically a self-centered bully and self-centered antagonist called Arrow. And it isn't until the reindeer games that Zoe finally has had enough with Arrow, breaks it off with him because she knows that her true love is Rudolph. Now, you'll probably say, well, how does this relate to Spike and Rarity? Well, it's real simple. Rarity and Spike are kind of in that similar dynamic. Yes, Spike is a small dragon. But as I've pointed out to some people, how do we know how old Spike really is? How do we know he's not a fully adult dragon, but just a small dragon in stature? We saw in Gauntlet for Fire that dragons come in all shapes and sizes. So who's to say Spike isn't in that category? Spike isn't in that category of being fully grown. He's just basically small, and he's just small for his size. You know what I'm saying? And who's to say Rarity wouldn't go for someone like that? True, it all depends on what writers finally decide to go through with it, or decide to at least acknowledge it in some way, but not fully go through with it. But who's to say that whoever decides someday to finally put this to rest and say, yes, they are, yes, there is something there, won't have Rarity finally, be with Spike officially? Who says that wouldn't happen? Again, it goes back to that classic underdog, I'll never be with the girl kind of trope kind of deal, whatever, because she's too beautiful and she's out of my league, and yet here you go. Another good example, if you want one, as crazy as it sounds, is a Goofy movie. See, Max thinking because he's related to his dad, because he's somewhat like a school nerd, whatever, he gets picked on, and yet he sees this beautiful girl in Roxanne, and he knows his main goal, and he knows that somehow he's got to be with her, or at least he's got to acknowledge, hey, I like you, I have feelings for you. He knows he's got to figure out a way to do that, because a part of him is like, straight up, there's no way he could actually be with somebody like her, because one, he has his dad's laugh. That would be unattractive. He'll grow up to be like his dad or look like his dad. That would be unattractive. So he has all these fears, and yet he still has the determination to go out and do what he has to do to get her attention. But what's funny about this is, as we find out at the end of the film, Roxanne liked him from the first time she heard him laugh. So it doesn't matter what he did, or who he is, or how he looks. It all takes one simple thing to make someone like you. And it could be something as silly as a laugh. That's about it. It could take something as silly as a laugh to get someone to like you. And again, going back to the whole Rudolph situation, that is a good example right there of the position Spike could be in. Now, another good example is, speaking of underdogs, let's talk about Underdog himself. Now, we know Underdog, in his alternate personality called Shoeboy, pretty much is nothing more than a friend to Sweet Polly Purebred. But when he becomes Underdog, he becomes something more. He's still himself, but now he's got the attention of Sweet Polly Purebred. Now, I don't think they've ever acknowledged or even showed that Polly Purebred knows Underdog and Shoeboy are one and the same. I don't think they've ever done that in the show. Maybe they've done it in the comics recently with IDW. I think IDW's got, or whoever's got the comic book license, they may have done it there, they may not have. But the point is, even if they've done it or they didn't, which I'm pretty sure maybe someone has done it, we just haven't seen it, or maybe it was something that they developed that they didn't want to release, I don't know. But I do feel down the line that they did do it. And what happened is basically Sweet Polly Purebred pretty much liked Shoeboy just as much as she liked Underdog, if not more so. Again, that's depending on if this was ever done. I do know that when it came to classic comic book things like DC Comics and Superman and Lois Lane, that Lois Lane, in a sense, knew who both were. And that even though she considered Clark Kent a colleague and a friend for quite some time, it was during that time that that colleagueness and that friendship started to build into something more, and they became boyfriend, girlfriend, lovers, you name it. And it wouldn't be until later on that, even though she knew the whole time, it wouldn't be till later on, well, depending on the kind of medium or version of Superman you read or watch, it wouldn't be until later on when Clark Kent would officially reveal that he is indeed Superman, that it would go off to, that things would, pretty much go to that next level. The point is, folks, but if you take that aside, the friendship that Lois Lane had with Clark as a colleague and as a friend blossomed into something more over time, even before she knew he was Superman, or even before he officially let her know, even if she knew before he even explained or even told her. The point is, these kind of relationships happen over time. It happens over time. And when you look at something like Spike and Rarity, the Sparity deal, everybody pretty much feels that if you have one more season on your list, which I seriously doubt they do. I mean, if you listen to Twilight in Celestia Advice earlier this season, she says she has 3 years worth of lessons lined up for Starlight. That's pretty much a hint of, yeah, we got 3 more seasons after this. But I'm not going to get off topic here. What I'm saying is when you look at possibly having 1 more season, or possibly having 3 more seasons, you know sooner or later you're going to have to go back and address this whole situation with Spike and Rarity. A couple of good examples of the fact that they would hint that there was something there, like I said, besides Secret of My Excess, is Inspiration Manifestation. There is Scaremaster, because look who hung around Spike a lot, even in the maze, and even held on to him tightly, and vice versa towards the end when they were scared half to death. And heck, if you want a better example, take a look at the freaking movie poster. Look who they have next to Rarity up front. He's not next to Twilight, he's next to Rarity. The point is, there are going to be subtle hints and acknowledgments, if not full blown on or full blown out episodes saying, dedicated to the whole Spike and Rarity deal. But we have to look at it like this. Sooner or later, they're going to have to fully address this. Megan McCarthy, Jason Teresen, M.A. Larson, Joanne Lewis, and Christine, whatever her last name, the lady writers, they're going to have to acknowledge this. They're going to have to come out and say, even Josh Haber, they're going to have to come out and acknowledge this eventually and say yay or nay. And I believe, in my honest opinion, one of them is going to do the yay, but they're going to do it in such a subtle way that it's going to say, yes, there is something there. Yes, they are probably more than just friends, but we're going to leave it at that. They're going to have to go in that direction eventually. One thing I bring up a lot is fans, we always like to, depending on how creative we are, some of us can be very creative. There's no doubt about that. I mean, if you want a good example, there's a Princess Luna animation called The Moon Rises or something like that. And it's pretty dang good. It feels like a feature-length film, a feature-length short that you can watch before a feature film in theaters. You got all those CGI animations that looks good. Pretty much puts any of those I'll just say those PS1 like films to direct-to-video animated knockoff films to rest. You have sometimes other original animation that's probably not as good, but it's decent. But it's not as good as The Moon Rises, but it's decent. And also you have what's known as fan works, fan art. You have fan webcomics. You have fan fiction. You have all these avenues where people, through their own interpretation, can take the whole Spike and Rarity relationship to another level. And believe me, you look online, you go to fanfiction.net, you go to the Pony Fiction website, you go to various message boards and websites like Equestria Daily and such, MLP forums, you name it, and you will see, out of all the you will see that not a majority, but most of what you would find could be Spike and Rarity related. Spike and Rarity, Sparity related. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. It's pretty much what you would see. It's pretty much what you would get. Not a majority of the stories, but it's pretty much what you would get. Same with webcomics. Heck, one webcomic that I always acknowledge and talk about is Burning Heart Brony's A Change of Heart that he did several years ago. To me, this is a perfect example of how the creative staff at DHX Media could adapt this kind of scenario into an episode. They can expand on it, adapt it, and you know what? All they'd have to do is do a story similar to A Change of Heart, and leave it at that, because at least you would get it out, because it's like I said before, they would at least get it out of the way, they would at least fully acknowledge the fans about acknowledge the relationship, the SpikexRarity shipping and all that to the overall fan base and the supporters of this pairing. And they would just leave it at that. Because at least they're saying, yes, there is something there more than friendship, but now we're going to leave it at that. And to me, like I said, a change of heart is a good example of that happening. Overall, I know I, along with a lot of fans, talk a lot about this, but I think, I believe, honestly, that if this season's got 1 to 3 more seasons to go, that they're going to have to do the very best. The creative staff and the comics and the show are going to have to do the very best to finally acknowledge this. Finally acknowledge it and say, yes, there is something there more than friendship, and that's it. Just like I said, you could take something like A Change of Heart, that webcomic by Burning Heart Brony, adapt it into an animated episode of the show, or even a comic book issue of the comic book, or its spin-off, Friends Forever, and leave it at that, because at least you would acknowledge there is something there. I mean, even the comic book writers know that this is something fans want to see, but if you go back and you look at the Nightmare Rarity arc, who is one of the last characters to help Rarity return to normal? Who is one of the last characters? Spike is the last character. He says what he says in that moment pretty much acknowledges the fact that he cares about Rarity more than just a friend. So to have the writers make Spike do what he did, help Rarity out, and say the line that he did. And if you hear anything in the background, like I said earlier, that's my washer and dryer. But to have him say the things that he did to help her out shows that even the writers of the comics realize that something's there. So I think it's not just if, but when. It's not a matter of if, but when this happens. And I believe, in my honest, humble opinion, that sooner or later, it's going to happen. It's got to happen. They've got to make this a reality. Whether they got 1 more season for the show to go, or they got 3 more seasons, they got to make it happen. Because I believe once they do it, and get it out of the system, and at least acknowledge that, yes, there is something there more than just friendship, I believe not only will it settle things down, but at least, I believe that not only in a sense will it kind of cool things down when it comes to the whole SpikexRarity deal and the question of yay or nay, but at least you will say that yes, there is something there more than friendship. There is something there. There's something there more than friendship, and that we're leaving the door open, just as we always have, but if not more so, for you, the fans, to interpretate what happens next. So when I look at the whole SpikexRarity, Spike and Rarity relationship, I look at something that is very akin to the underdog story, but mostly very relatable to what you have seen in the classic Christmas specials of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. That's how I look at it. And you know what? Maybe we'll get something similar down the line, who knows. But like I said, if they ever want a good example, check out Burning Heart Brony's story of A Change of Heart. Because to me, that's probably the best way a scenario like this could happen officially in the show. So that's all I'm going to say. Because like I said, I don't think this is over yet. In fact, I think, in a sense, they haven't even begun to scratch the surface. But really, that's all I'm going to say on it, folks. What are your thoughts on it? How do you think the writers should approach this finally, and possibly in the final seasons or the final days of the show? Let me know down below. Comment if you like, and I'll talk to y'all later.